All right, we'll stick with this. Is that all right? No buzz right now? We'll see how it goes. Well, I want to thank Tridec for this opportunity to share with you a little bit about what's going on at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. As Mike said, it's a great partnership we have between Pnnl and the Department of Energy in stewarding this great asset. And what I'd like to do in this short period of time is tell a little bit about what we do in terms of the impact we have both globally and here in the region. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about the outlook for 2016 and beyond and some of the things going on at the laboratory. So let me begin by telling you a little bit about what we do. And there's a lot going on at the laboratory. We have over 4,000 employees. I'll give you some stats a little bit later. About $1 billion of taxpayer investment in this laboratory. And we work in a number of areas. There's a lot of programs going on at the laboratory. When we look at it, we've developed a unifying and overarching science vision that describes much of what we do. And that vision is that we seek to understand, predict, and control the behavior of complex adaptive systems. In particular, we look at 3 systems of interest to the Department of Energy and the nation more broadly. First system is the Earth system. Think about the complex planet, the complex processes going on our planet. For example, the climate system. We want to understand that. In particular of interest is the water cycle. And I'll give some examples of that in just a moment. We also look at the energy system, what we do to produce and distribute energy and how we manage that flow. And an exemplar here is the electric grid and the work we do in there. I'll talk about that. And finally, the security system, what we do to detect and then counter threats to our citizens and allies abroad. And so there's a lot going on in here. Don't worry, I won't go through each one of these in great technical length. This may be a little bit esoteric to some. What I'd like to do, though, is connect what we do at the laboratory to things you may have read about in the Herald, online, or experienced in your own lives. So let's start with one example taken from the Earth system, and let's make it real. Is this working now? All right. So what you can see over here is a situation from the western United States we're all familiar with. Although the last few days have been pretty wet in the west, overall we're experiencing a very severe drought. In particular, hard hit is California over the last several years. What you see here is their largest reservoir, Lake Oroville. And just to make it clear, if I can find the pointer here. So here's Lake Oroville, picture taken in 2001, 2014. Not quite the same perspective, but just orient yourself. This island in 2011 is no longer an island. That shows you how far down that reservoir is in terms of providing drinking water, recreation, and power production. And of course, up here in the Northwest, we depend very heavily on the water cycle, and it matters to us how that precipitation falls, whether it's rain or snow. We count on the snowpack basically to serve as a giant battery to storage energy that we release in hydroelectric power production later. And so one of the things we try to do at the laboratory is really work on understanding the water cycle and more generally the climate system and understand what regional impacts we might see from global climate change. There's a lot of research we do there, in particular deployment of sophisticated instrumentation to understand precipitation, to look at the clouds and understand how they interact with various processes. And we do analyses that then feed into computer models that help us understand the long-term prospects for climate change. What do I mean here in the Northwest and other regions of interest? We also look at seasonal variations such as the El Nino and La Nina cycles, and that's what this paper here is about. So that's one way we're doing some work that we all experience in terms of the droughts we've been seeing. We also know that climate science and change is a lot in the news. And here, just last month, there was a gathering of nearly 200 countries in Paris for the COP21 conference on the treaty negotiations about what we're going to do together to try to take steps to slow the increase in global temperatures. And what we do also is, in addition to the analysis and research we do, fitting into models, we do so-called integrated assessments in which we attempt to understand what does all this mean, and if you have certain policy actions that governments might take, what might that do? And so we do analyses. And in fact, at the very day this conference started, we published a paper that talked about the options being discussed and said that although the actions being proposed would increase the likelihood of keeping the global temperature increase to below 4 and possibly below 2 degrees, it wasn't certain. And that's why you saw several countries advocating for a 1.5 degree maximum. If we move now to the energy system, we also are concerned with how we produce our electricity and consume it. A big part of that is the electric grid. That's really the machine we use to manage electricity flow in this country. All right? This laboratory has been a world leader in envisioning the future power grid and modernizing that. In fact, you would have read over the weekend in the Herald that our laboratory is co-leading an initiative for the Department of Energy to modernize our electric grid. And the Secretary of Energy announced $220 million of funding for 14 laboratories, co-led by Pnnl, to look at ways in which we could modernize that grid. And one of the things we do here in our Electricity Infrastructure Operations Center is look at new techniques in which we can bring together the power of information technology and energy technologies to manage that grid more cost effectively with greater reliability and resiliency. So a lot of work going on here in one of our new buildings, and I'll say a lot more about our buildings and the construction plans towards the end of this talk. But this is happening in our systems engineering building that we just dedicated last August. Staying in energy, one of the biggest uses of energy in this country is transportation. 25% of our energy usage is for transportation. And automobiles and light trucks account for about half that total usage. And so the other thing we're doing in the laboratory is looking for ways in which we can reduce that consumption. For example, more fuel-efficient vehicles. We had a column yesterday in the Herald talking about some of the research we're doing. What I'll call it here is just one example of where we're taking some of our material science and engineering expertise, working with companies to look at how we can lightweight parts going into the automobiles. Here what you're seeing is a team, whoops, excuse me, we'll get to the airplanes later. Here what you can see is a team of Pnnl scientists and engineers looking at this, actually yielding a door using lightweight aluminum. This is important because what they come up with is a technique called friction stir welding that allows you to bring together two different types of materials and materials of different thickness. That's important because what you'd like to be able to do is have a stronger, thicker material, say here near the door hinge, and lighter material here. And you can see the weld right here, that white line, without sacrificing overall strength or integrity of the part. This is important because by doing it this way, we showed you can actually reduce the manufacturing cost by 25% and reduce the weight of the door by 62%, yielding greater fuel efficiency and savings. Tremendous advance. That technology has been developed in collaboration with a company that's now producing about 250,000 of the door panels for the auto industry. And we continue to advance that by looking at different techniques and further advance that work. One of the places you might want to take your automobile is to the airport. And so one of the things we do a lot of work in here in our security work is really what do we do to keep travelers and our citizens safe? And you've read a lot about this in the past, and what we do here is we have some technology called millimeter wave detection that allows us to really detect objects very accurately and quickly, so we're not delaying travelers too much. You've seen some of these, in fact, in the Pasco airport now, the full body scanner. And it very quickly scans, gets the results out, and moves the people through and helps keep us safe while we're boarding the airplanes. And I think all of you now are familiar with the Pnnl salute. So next time you see someone in one of those things, this is the Pnnl salute. All right? On the global stage, I should say, on this, we've licensed that technology a while back. More than 1,300 of those devices are used at over 250 airports worldwide. Going to the world, there's also a lot going on in broader threats to our country and our allies. One of the things we still worry about a lot is the spread of nuclear weapons, understanding what potential adversaries may be doing in that space. And again, it is unfortunately frequently in the news. Just on the top photo, you can see a photo taken from some of the negotiations with Iran earlier last year, yielding the treaty, which just had implementation day very recently. Second, in the photo here, we see a well-known individual who's claiming to have an H-bomb. The fact of the matter is, it matters to our country what these people are able to do, what capabilities they truly have, or what they're on the verge of having. And so one of the things that we and other national laboratories do is provide the technical expertise to really understand what these adversaries are capable of doing. And so we have technical experts and capabilities, in this case ultra-trace detection, where we build detectors that are used for either monitoring events or for verifying various treaties we want to have in place. In this particular picture, what you're seeing is that we're growing ultra-pure copper. We buy the purest copper we can. We then purify it further in our underground laboratory and use that to make ultra-sensitive detectors for deployment around the world for monitoring and verification purposes. So these are just a few of the ways in which I think you see we're having a national and global impact in serving our nation. We also have a very large impact locally. As the largest single private employer in Eastern Washington, we take that responsibility seriously. And one of the things we do each year is we do a study that aggregates the overall economic impact of the laboratory. That study is available, it's online. We have a cheat sheet out there just with the key facts. But we roll it up, and this report is from 2014. So most of the numbers I'll give you here are for 2014. When you look at the total impact of the laboratory, both direct and indirect, is about $2.6 billion of economic output. Most of that here in the Tri-Cities, and the vast majority certainly within Washington State. Most of this, of course, this impact is due to our terrific employees, the scientists, engineers, and support professionals who do all those wonderful things for our nation, and also happen to be our neighbors living mostly here in the Tri-Cities. 2014, we had 4,308 employees. I'll update that for you in just a minute, where it stands and where it's headed, with a total payroll of a little over $400 million. So these are well-paying jobs. And of course, we also pay local and state taxes. What I show here is a map. The vast majority of these employers are in Richland. We have a small office in Portland, some over in Sequim, Seattle, and a group in Washington, D.C. area in Maryland in climate change research. We also bring in a very large number of collaborators from across the world and the country here to work with us in that R&D. And we have about 2,000 scientists and engineers and other people visiting the laboratory every year, coming in to work with us in our R&D. We host those people. On average, are spending about $200 a day here in the Tri-Cities when they visit. One of the things we recognize is that we need the ability to host larger scientific meetings. We did this a few years ago. It was a little embarrassing when we had to bring in a circus tent to host a meeting on batteries. So one of the things we're doing is building a new collaboration center that allows us to host meetings that Pnnl cannot currently host. Moving forward, in addition to bringing people in to help us develop new technologies, we then look what we can do to make sure that we're getting our R&D out of the laboratory and into the private sector where it can create jobs and wealth. And a big part of what we do here, and certainly a big part of what Pnnl values, is what we can do in technology transfer and commercialization. And so if you look at it, the scientists and engineers of the laboratory, on average, each day are coming up with an invention, every business day. We have over 200 invention disclosures per year, and more than 1 patent per week coming out of the laboratory. We then license that technology to firms and work with them. Since our inception, more than 170 firms can trace their intellectual property or people to Pnnl. Of those 170, 99 are still in operation today, 71 of them in Washington State. We regularly see our employees take that entrepreneurial plunge to form a company based on research they've done at the laboratory. Recently, Gary Yang and some colleagues developed some work in redox flow batteries. They had enough confidence in their work to take that, form a company, seek and get venture capital, formed a company over in Mukilteo, and it's the largest capacity flow battery now in North America and Europe. You're seeing here Governor Inslee dedicating the installation of one of their large flow batteries in Pullman. These are large-scale batteries for grid and other large industrial purposes, and they're up to about 50 employees and growing. They just had another round of VC invested. So that's one way in which we help people create companies. We also work with local companies when they have some technical problems where we might have expertise that can help them out. We're glad to lend that through our technical assistance program. About 55 such projects in 2014, many of those here locally. Just 3 examples of many. Champion In this case, it was some software expertise that we had that allowed them to go in and develop a soft analytic package for detecting cyber intrusions in a business. Increasingly important. You read about that all the time. It was one of our software engineers, helped them out, actually became a CTO there. We also then, in Excel SciTech, we lended some of our material science expertise, both in terms of intellectual property and people, to help them develop some nanospheres that are used in cancer treatments. And then with Carbitex, again, our material science expertise, helping them with some of their proprietary carbon fiber technologies they use for a variety of consumer goods. So these are ways in which we help a number of firms locally. And finally, we're very proud to be part of this community, and our staff give back regularly, as does Pnnl and the laboratory. Almost $1 million given back through various contributions from corporate and through our staff in the laboratory through a variety of means. You can see here what we're doing, a Pnnl build for Habitat for Humanity, nearly $250,000 a year through United Way, and of course our passion for STEM education comes through, whether it's a donation to help start, the community start for Delta, or continuing involvement in a number of programs where we help to prepare youth for fields to get them excited about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I'd also like to point out that figure down there. Our staff give more than 40,000 hours of their own time, volunteer time, to this community, showing how much we appreciate being here and value being part of it. Looking ahead, we've got a lot of opportunities. What you see here from 2015, our budget was about $955 million, 4,400 staff. So you recall in 2014 we're at 4,300, up to about 4,400. Looking ahead, predicting that will climb probably on the order of another 100 employees or so when you see the next budget slide. Here we're showing the major sponsors. We are a very diversified national laboratory in terms of the sponsors who support, ranging from the Office of Science, which is our steward, to work we do for the Applied Energy and Environmental programs, national security, I've mentioned non-proliferation, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and others. So a very diverse amount of work we do. And we look ahead, 2016 is presenting a lot of opportunities. It was already noted the budget that was passed just before the holidays was very good in general to this community, in particular to R&D. If we look at all our major sponsors, every one of those major sponsors' top line number is up. Now what we're doing now is trying to translate that into what opportunities it presents for us to have an even bigger impact as a national laboratory. Just showing a few of these. I've already mentioned the grid modernization, and closely coupled to that is what we're doing in buildings control and several of these other areas of things we're working at, looking towards now. I would like to take this opportunity, though, to point out that these budgets don't happen by accident. There's a lot of competing interests, and I want to thank Tridec for all it does to lobby on behalf of this community, the laboratory, the Hanford contractors, and others, in addition to bringing projects like Sunrise to the community. I want to thank them, and I also want to thank our congressional delegation for listening. What they do is they listen to these things, and they do a great job of representing us. So I'd like to ask you to join me giving a round of applause to Tridec in particular, and to our delegation for making these things happen. With that bright future, we have to continue to invest in the laboratory. So I'll wrap up here with just a look at our facilities. And we've developed, in partnership with Roger and his team, a 12-year plan for investing in the renewal of the laboratory. You're seeing here a picture. North is to the left. Here's the laboratory. So here's GW Way up here. Here's the bypass, Battelle Boulevard. And what we're doing is we're expanding out in this direction. In particular, what you're going to see here is that we've already gotten, I'll mention each of these buildings in turn. We've already got one of these buildings built, another one nearly ready to go, and others on the docket. In particular, we have here is a plan to spend about $300 million over 12 years, and we're in year 3 or 4 of that, about a building a year going up. We're also planning a new energy sciences facility. Don't yet have funding for that, but we're hopeful. And we're very proud to employ our local design and engineering firms in the construction of these buildings. And in fact, to look at them, what we have here is the systems engineering building, housing a lot of that grid work I talked about. We dedicated that last August. A general purpose chemistry laboratory is under construction, and we expect to dedicate that and occupy it in the spring. We've already got a contract awarded for a new office building to house the people who are doing the research in these buildings, and the collaboration center shortly on its heels, the conceptual models out there. So a lot of activity going on, a lot of construction will be happening out of the laboratory using firms here in the Tri-Cities. So I want to thank you all. We think we have a very bright future at this laboratory. We're very proud to be part of this community, and I thank you all for your support and your time this morning.